This footage shows Gerhard van Vuuren as he relentlessly chased Andrea Venter while wielding a knife and leaving a trail of blood behind him. Despite the presence of guards and onlookers, and despite Andrea's desperate pleas for help, the man viciously stabbed her 14 times before slitting her throat. After killing her, Gerhard can be seen repositioning Andrea's lifeless body and removing the belt that he had previously tied around her neck. Then, without hesitation, he proceeded to cut his own throat in front of the horrified crowd and calmly lay down next to his victim's lifeless body. Join us today as we explore the disturbing details of this heinous murder caught on camera and attempt to understand the twisted mindset of the stalker who viciously took the life of Andrea Venter.
I'm going to react to this true crime documentary about the story of Andrea Venter. I have 17 years of law enforcement experience, and 8 of those years in criminal investigations.
Gerhard Jansen van Vuuren Jr. was a bright and inquisitive child who was keen to learn more about his surroundings. He excelled in school and had a strong interest in technology, which drove him to pursue a career in the information technology professional world. Growing up in Koster, a small town in the northwest provinces of South Africa, Gerhard's childhood was marked by his parents' divorce when he was just 2 years old. His mother, Thea Pistorius, believed that Gerhard was the product of gender abuse, and she left her abusive husband.
My child comes from serious gender-based violence. My children grew up in a very, very broken home, and we were very abused. Emotionally, physically, sexually, in any way. And I always wanted to divorce my husband, but he always told me if I leave him, he'll kill my children.
This unfortunately meant that Gerhard was raised by his father, who regrettably did not act.
You would be surprised how often this actually happens. The wife wants out of the relationship. You have kids. The husband, well, if you leave me, I'm going to do this to the kids or that to the kids. And the woman is trapped. It's a horrible situation.
Act as a positive role model for how to treat women. As a child, Gerhard was exposed to graphic pornography by his father, which led him to develop a pornography addiction from a very young age as a coping mechanism to deal with the violence and dysfunction in their messy home life. His father frequently beat and abused Gerhard so violently that eventually he would say that pain became pleasure to him because it was all he knew. As a result, Gerhard had few safe havens from the abuse of his father. His only sanctuary was the computer, where he could watch pornography from his father's collections, which were scattered all over the house. His personal life was marred by tragedy. Yvonne, his sister, took her own life at the age of 19 in 1994. The loss of his elder sister was a devastating blow for Gerhard, but unfortunately it would not be the last. His brother also ended his own life in 2011, and Gerhard himself suffered from clinical depression and even attempted to end his own life on one occasion, but that attempt was of course unsuccessful. In the midst of all of this misfortune, Gerhard tried to find joy in his relationships. He was generous and once paid for his girlfriend's flight to London, where she had secured a position with a top company. He would find solace in bringing joy to others, especially those whom he had imprinted on. But even this generosity could not shield him from the pain and grief he carried with him. Gerhard's childhood experiences and family tragedies would continue to impact his life in ways he could not have imagined, turning him into an obsessive, possessive, and even violent admirer of a young girl named Andrea Venter. Andrea was born on March the 25th, 1993. She was the only daughter to her parents, Dries Venter and Antje Venter. Andrea was the first test tube baby in South Africa. Growing up, she called the quiet town of Schweitzer Reneke her home, nestled between the bustling cities of Johannesburg and Kimberley. Even though Schweitzer Reneke boasts a relatively small population of just 50,000 people, her town was still a close-knit community with a laid-back atmosphere, providing a perfect setting for Andrea's happy childhood. From an early age, Andrea...
This is the first time me knowing anything about this case or watching it. So if it's the first few, we're watching it together for the first time. And didn't they say this is in South Africa? I believe that's what they said.
Had an outgoing and sociable personality, always eager to spend time with her friends and family. Her infectious smile and positive attitude made her a popular figure in her family and group of friends, and she was loved by all who knew her. With a love for outdoor sports, Andrea excelled in games like netball, hockey, and tennis, demonstrating her innate athleticism and competitive spirit. Andrea was also a talented musician, with an aptitude for playing piano and guitar. Her musical skills and creativity were a testament to her multifaceted nature and her passion for exploring new horizons. With her cheerful personality, diverse talents, and an unwavering love for life, Andrea Venter embarked on a journey that would take her far beyond the confines of Schweizer Reneke and into the vast and unpredictable world that awaited her. After finishing high school, she bid farewell to her hometown and embarked on a new journey that would take her to the Northwest University in Potchefstroom, a much bigger city than the town she had come from. While at university, Andrea devoted herself to the study of commerce and accounting, eager to learn about the intricacies of the business world. As always, Andrea approached her studies with the same dedication and passion that had defined her approach to life. She was an outstanding student, constantly pushing herself to achieve and excel at her goals. Her hard work paid off in the end, as she received her accounting degree and graduated with honors. With her education now complete, Andrea was set to begin a new path. But little did she know the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, pushing her to the limits and testing her in ways that she could never have imagined. Upon graduating, Andrea's quest for employment led her to Rustenburg, which was an even larger city at just over 500,000 people, known as the Platinum City due to their rich platinum deposits. Though Rustenburg was a far cry from the small town of Schweizer Reneke where she had grown up, Andrea was excited to have landed her dream job in accounting and savored her new carefree lifestyle. And it was here, not long after Andrea had relocated to Rustenburg, that she met a man named Gerhard Jansen van Vuuren. Even though Gerhard was 12 years her senior, Andrea was suddenly drawn to the man and felt a deep attraction. Likewise, he shared this attraction with Andrea, and before long the two had fallen head over heels in love. But as their relationship went on, it didn't take long for Gerhard's possessive and controlling behavior to become apparent to Andrea, and their relationship would take a turn for the worse. Despite Andrea's best efforts to make things work, Gerhard's need for dominance grew more and more intense. This ultimately resulted in heated arguments between the two. At first, Gerhard would just yell and scream. Then he would become physically violent. Andrea was left with a heavy heart, feeling she had no choice but to end the relationship. It was a difficult decision, but she knew it was the right one. So eventually she told Gerhard that it was time for them to part ways and to end their relationship. The experience left her feeling disheartened, but she vowed to take control of her life and forge ahead with a newfound strength and determination.
You know, good for her. She realized this was a no-win situation, and no one, male or female, should ever be physically abused by their partner or anyone. But I'm happy she realized this.
But little did Andrea know at the time, Gerhard was not ready to be tossed aside so easily. He had imprinted himself onto her and was willing to go to any extreme to maintain their relationship. Growing up, Gerhard used pornography as a means of escape from his abusive father, but now he saw Andrea as his sanctuary of happiness and was not ready to let her go. So his possessiveness continued to grow and intensify day by day. Andrea's parents were gravely concerned about their daughter's state. Their once bubbly and outgoing daughter had become a shadow of her former self due to the toll her relationship took on her with the much older and abusive man. Eventually, after failing to cut Gerhard out of her life, Andrea heeded her parents' advice and decided to take legal action against him by filing a protection order. But instead of respect...
Okay, I don't know about South Africa, of course, but even in my state where I live, it's usually in these situations either a restraining order or an order of protection, which sounds like this was what this one is. And I'm just going to tell you in my experience, because at 17 years, I dealt with this a lot as in law enforcement. In my state, the restraining order, honestly, is not worth the paper it's written on. It's sort of a joke. Now, the order of protection is taken very serious in my state. The order of protection is if she took it against this guy, if he goes anywhere around her, if he calls her, if he tells someone else to go talk to her on his behalf, you are immediately arrested for a violation of order of protection. Very, very, very strong paperwork in the court system. And I'm not an attorney, but I highly suggest that if you're in one of these type situations.
Respecting Andrea's wishes, Gerhard became even more enraged by this. Andrea started avoiding him. She even began hiding from him, but somehow he always knew where to find her. Gerhard had begun to threaten Andrea, and when he realized that she was taking advice from her parents, he turned his sights towards them as well. Andrea's father, Dries, later recounted how Gerhard had threatened their entire family, making promises of harming them if he could not find Andrea.
Because when she doesn't listen to him, he told her, I'm coming killing your parents.
He threatened your lives as well, didn't he?
Yeah, my life and my wife's life. As we told him to move out and never contact us again, he just carried on threatening my daughter.
Gerhard's threats were chilling. He would frequently say things like, "If I can't have her, nobody else will," and even went so far as threatening to hire people to harm Andrea's father, Dries, and sexually assault his wife, Antje, Andrea's mother. As the situation became more dire, it became clear that Andrea's safety and well-being were at stake. Andrea knew she had to escape Rustenburg in order to stay safe. She had an unhinged stalker who would stop at nothing to keep her in that abusive relationship. So, after filing for a protection order against Gerhard, Andrea decided to start a new life in a new city. She packed up her belongings and moved to the nearby city of Johannesburg, hoping the move would help her escape his grip. Meanwhile, Gerhard was going out of his mind trying to find her. He became desperate, and his mind was consumed with thoughts of her. He was obsessed with Andrea, and the thought of losing her drove him to madness. He searched every corner of Rustenburg, but it seemed that she had vanished without a trace. His luck changed when the police reached out to him regarding the protection order. The order forced him to stay away from Andrea's workplace, her home, and any other place that she might frequently visit. But unfortunately, the police order mentioned Johannesburg. At first, Gerhard could not understand why, but as he pondered over it, he came to the realization that that was the only piece of information he had on her whereabouts. With nothing to lose, he planned a trip to Johannesburg, determined to find her. But the sprawling metropolis of Johannesburg loomed before Gerhard like a maze of concrete and steel. A daunting challenge for anyone searching for a single person in a sea of 4.4 million people. But Gerhard was undeterred, driven by his obsession to find Andrea. Based on his knowledge that she was a professional accountant, he figured that Andrea would most likely have found a job in the new city when she moved. So he went about calling every accounting firm in the city until he finally heard the voice on the other end of the line. It was Andrea. It was a moment of triumph and ecstasy, and the sound of her voice brought back memories of their past and the realization that he had.
Man, this guy, he's determined. I mean, no question. We already sort of know what's going to happen at the beginning of the video. But this guy, I mean, what did they say, 4.4 million people? He called every number, and for she does accounting. She just happened to answer the phone. Man, this guy, he means business, which is horrible.
Finally found her. He now knew where she worked, so he went there and watched her from a distance, following her every move, learning her routine and her habits. The more he saw of her, the more his love grew, and so did his desperation and his fear that he might lose her again. Meanwhile, Andrea lived in a state of constant fear, knowing that her stalker was somewhere out there lurking in the shadows waiting to strike. She had fled to Johannesburg to escape him, hoping to start a new life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Gerhard would never give up searching for her.
You know, I'm just sitting here thinking, if there's anything up to this point that she could have gotten him arrested for, I don't think he's done anything at this point that's arrestable, which would be great for her. Then she could finally get out of this situation. But let me know in the comments if you've heard anything so far. I may have missed it.
The city of Johannesburg became an arena, with Gerhard on one side, consumed by his obsession, and Andrea on the other, fighting for her survival. Tragedy struck on Friday, April the 29th, 2011, when Gerhard Jansen van Vuuren gave in to his twisted urges. By this point, he had figured out which apartment complex Andrea lived in, and with little effort, he was able to slip quietly into the supposedly safe and gated residential apartment complex where Andrea Venter had sought refuge.
Yeah, when you have a guy this determined, a place like that, he's going to be able to get in. He's going to figure out a way. This guy's not dumb by any means. So, yeah, that's a scary situation.
Despite all of her efforts to escape his grasp by moving to a different city, finding a new job, and obtaining a protection order against him, fate had other plans. When Andrea arrived back home, Gerhard was there, standing before her, and Andrea's worst nightmare would come true. She was cornered, trapped, and powerless as the stalker forced her into her apartment. The terror in her heart only grew when Gerhard revealed the true reason for his intrusion. He was there to reunite with his lost love. He forced her into the apartment where he held her captive for the entire weekend. By this point, Andrea was a mere pawn in a twisted delusion as Gerhard began to put Andrea through a weekend of pure agony and anguish. Gerhard had his way with her, repeatedly violating and abusing her in unspeakable ways. She was made to suffer endlessly at the hands of a man that she had once seen as a friend and lover. In the early morning hours of May the 2nd, 2011, after being held captive for an entire weekend and suffering unspeakable abuse at the hands of her stalker, Andrea managed to escape from her apartment bloody and bruised, with Gerhard's belt still wrapped around her neck, the one he used to choke her. CCTV footage captured her running and screaming for help, but no one came to her rescue. Gerhard was hot on her heels, pursuing Andrea while wielding a knife in his hand. Despite the presence of guards, residents, and onlookers, no one would intervene in this chaotic scene unfolding before them. Gerhard was in control, and he was determined to carry out his twisted plan. He had already made it clear to Andrea's father that if he couldn't have her, no one else would. And now, with a knife in his hand, he was ready to make good on that threat. Andrea's scream...
You know, that's horrible. They said guards, onlookers, and they said something else. If someone could have just stopped this man at this point, they've got him for all kinds of crimes. They've got him for the kidnapping, keeping her in her apartment, enough to put him away for a pretty good while. And this event, what we're getting ready to see, I'm assuming, would not have happened if someone just got involved.
Went unanswered as Gerhard mercilessly punched her with a knuckle buster, and when that was not enough to end her life, Gerhard turned to his knife and proceeded to stab Andrea Venter 14 times before finally slitting her throat from ear to ear. It was a gruesome scene, one that would haunt those who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. Gerhard, feeling that his purpose in life had been extinguished along with Andrea's life, saw no reason to go on living. So he proceeded to make an attempt to take his own life in front of the horrified crowd. He slit his own throat, and in the final moments he was seen repositioning Andrea's lifeless body and removing the belt from around her neck before lying down beside her in a pool of blood. Andrea's life was cut short by the violent actions of her stalker, and the ripple effects of that tragedy would be felt by all who knew her. A short time later, the wailing sirens of police and ambulance echoed through the city in the early morning silence as several frantic calls from eyewitnesses summoned the authorities. But despite their swift response, it was too late. Andrea Venter lay lifeless, while Gerhard clung to a feeble heartbeat. In a cruel twist of fate, it was Andrea's designated ambulance that now received Gerhard as he was rushed to the Life Fourways Hospital in Johannesburg under police and doctors' vigilant supervision. The days stretched on, but eventually, 6 weeks later, Gerhard made a miraculous recovery. But immediately, the Randburg Magistrates Court charged him with the heinous crime of the murder of Andrea Venter. It may seem baffling that Gerhard was not swiftly brought to trial for this unspeakable crime. Despite the damning evidence against him, including the CCTV footage, numerous eyewitness accounts, and the murder weapon being found in his possession, he somehow managed to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. Though it was clear that he had both the means and motive to commit the heinous act, even including a protection order that had been filed by Andrea against him, standing as a testament to his twisted intentions, the police had arrested him at the scene of the murder, yet justice was continuously delayed as the trial kept being repeatedly postponed for more than 19 months. It was a travesty of justice that Andrea Venter's family was forced to endure such a prolonged agony in their quest for closure. The situation became even more distressing by the fact that Gerhard was granted bail on the 3rd of December 2012 for a mere 15,000 rand, or approximately $1,000. Deere, who had a critical role in leading the investigative psychology unit. He boldly took a stand against Gerhard's request for bail in court, citing his disregard for the law, as confirmed by his violation of the protection order. It was a clear indication that he was likely to violate his bail conditions as well. It was a compelling argument.
Well, yeah, $1,000 U.S. money. Well, he has nothing. I'd be gone if I was this guy, if I got out on that kind of bond. Like I said, I know nothing about the justice system in South Africa, but it seems ridiculous.
But unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears. The Johannesburg High Court granted Gerhard bail for the shockingly small amount of 15,000 rands, which left Dr. Labuschagne feeling disappointed and frustrated. He believed that justice was not fully served in the heart-wrenching case of Andrea Venter's murder. The news of her daughter's murderer roaming free has understandably shocked Andrea's parents and served as a further reminder of the injustices that continue to plague the legal system in South Africa. After being granted bail, Gerhard roamed free for more than a year, awaiting his trial date. But after some time, and with his trial date nearing, unsurprisingly, Gerhard suddenly vanished into thin air. As previously predicted by the Brigadier Labuschagne, Gerhard had skipped bail and did not appear for his court date on May the 3rd, 2013. It was later discovered that Gerhard's parents were not only complicit in his escape, but had actively aided him in his flight from justice. On the eve of his court appearance, his father had driven him to Durban, where he boarded a flight to Brazil via Dubai. The audacity of the escape was astounding, but the true mastermind behind it was his mother. She had procured a fake passport for her son, ensuring a seamless exit from the country. When confronted with her actions, she could offer no justification, only the desperate plea of a child.
I've got no excuse for that. I'm just a mother, and unfortunately, afterwards I felt very guilty about it.
Eventually, the guilt of helping her son escape after committing such a gruesome crime got the better of her, and she contacted Brigadier Labuschagne, the investigating psychologist, revealing Gerhard's whereabouts. It was a turning point in the case, and for the first time in months, authorities had a lead on the fugitive's location. Gerhard Jansen van Vuuren was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. As Gerhard was roaming free on the streets of Rio in 2013, advocate J.J. Dutoit was hard at work. A seasoned deputy director of public prosecution with 17 years of experience extraditing war criminals from Yugoslavia, he had set his sights on Gerhard, a fugitive who had fled to Brazil on a fake passport. Advocate Dutoit meticulously prepared all of the paperwork, armed with warrants, DNA evidence, and Gerhard's fake passport with a different identity. He was able to secure a swift response from Brazil to his request. In August of 2013, Gerhard was arrested in Rio de Janeiro, but he was sentenced to 2 years in prison for using a fake passport to enter Brazil, delaying his extradition back to South Africa. Despite this setback, justice seemed to be within reach. But fate had other plans. Inexplicably, Gerhard was released on good behavior in 2015 without being extradited to South Africa. Allegedly, a judge had made the decision to release him, stating that he had served his sentence and should be free. The head of the prison opposed the judge's decision, arguing that Gerhard needed to be extradited to South Africa to face his pending murder case. But in the end, the judge's ruling stood, and Gerhard was allowed.
Oh, sounds like Brazil has some crazy justice system stuff also. That's unheard of.
To walk free yet again. It was a baffling turn of events, and one that left many questioning the integrity of the justice system in Brazil. The elusive Gerhard Jansen van Vuuren had managed to evade Interpol for 5 years, leaving authorities stumped as to his whereabouts. With a population of over 200 million people, he had seemingly vanished without a trace. But fate has a way of catching up with even the most cunning of criminals. Gerhard had started a new life with a wife and daughter, and in a momentary lapse of judgment, he carelessly reached out to his mother on Facebook, telling her about his new life with a wife and a baby. It was this social media interaction that had given away his location, leading police to a carefully planned raid by a team of experts from Interpol, the SAP, and the Brazilian police.
Yes, if you're using social media and police are involved, they can find out exactly where you were when you used that. It's a very good tool for law enforcement.
The raid team entered the address at the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro. They found Gerhard in his living room with his unsuspecting family. He had grown so comfortable in his new life that he had forgotten that he was a wanted man. But his forgetfulness had cost him dearly, as he was arrested and held in custody in Brazil before being extradited back to South Africa to face trial. When Brigadier Dr. Labuschagne shared pictures of Gerhard's arrest, Andrea's father felt a sense of relief, knowing that he was no longer at liberty. The pretrial hearing had been reportedly postponed on the grounds of Gerhard's alleged mental instability, a claim made by none other than his own mother. However, after 7 long years of evading the law, Gerhard had nowhere left to hide. To the surprise of many, Gerhard's most vocal supporter, his own mother, revealed in a public interview that she had never seen him show any remorse for his heinous crime that he had committed against Andrea Venter. In fact, he believed that she deserved to die. Shockingly, he had even threatened his own mother for aiding the authorities in their pursuit of him. When asked about an appropriate sentence for her son, his mother was quick to respond with one word: life. It was clear that justice needed to be served, not just for Andrea's sake, but for the safety of those around Gerhard. Finally, on August the 5th, 2022, Gerhard Jansen van Vuuren was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Andrea Venter. The case had taken over a decade to reach its conclusion, but justice had finally been served.
If you like these type of reaction videos on true crime, just what I did, please subscribe to my channel and like my videos.